The city was silent under a thick blanket of snow. Streets once alive with bustling energy were now deserted, their echoes buried beneath layers of frost. Winter's cruel hand had gripped New York City, and the blizzard's relentless howls echoed through the empty alleyways. Against a brick wall, Mike sat slumped, his thin coat doing little to shield him from the unforgiving cold. The dim light of a street lamp flickered above him, casting his huddled figure into soft shadows. Mike was no stranger to hardship. Once a hopeful young musician, he had dreamed of making it big, of filling concert halls with his melodies. But life, with its sharp turns and bitter blows, had led him hurry to the streets, with nothing but a worn guitar and the ache of forgotten dreams. His hands trembled as he pulled his coat tighter, his breath forming small clouds that quickly dissolved into the icy air. The cold knotted his bones, and he wondered, not for the first time, if he could endure another night like this. As the snow swirled around him, Mike's head drooped, the exhaustion of his struggles threatening to pull him into an endless sleep. Then through the haze of his half-closed eyes, he noticed movement. Something small and golden was making its way toward him, weaving through the snowdrifts. The creature paused a few feet away, its golden fur shimmering under the streetlight, dusted with snow. It was thin, ribs faintly visible beneath its scruffy coat, but its eyes gleamed with an unexpected warmth. The dog tilted its head, studying Mike with a mix of curiosity and caution. Mike blinked, unsure if the cold was playing tricks on him. He extended a hand, his fingers stiff and nearly frozen. "Hey there, little buddy," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the wind. The dog hesitated, sniffing the air, then took a tentative step forward. Its nose brushed against Mike's hand, cold and wet, but comforting in its presence. With a soft huff, the dog lowered itself and curled up beside him, pressing its warm body against his side. The unexpected gesture sent a wave of emotion coursing through Mike. He hadn't felt warmth through a warmth, either physical or emotional, in what seemed like years. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, not from the cold but from the sudden, unspoken bond he felt with this stray. "Where'd you come from?" Huff, he whispered, running his fingers through the dog's fur. It was softer than he expected, despite the weathered look of its coat. The dog responded with a soft wag of its tail, a subtle but unmistakable sign of trust. Mike decided to call him Buddy. For hours they sat together, the storm raging around them. Buddy didn't leave Mike's side, his presence offering not just physical warmth but a glimmer of hope. Mike found himself stroking Buddy's fur, the repetitive motion calming him, grounding him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. As dawn approached, the storm began to wane. The first light of morning spilled over the snow-covered streets, painting them in shades of pale gold and icy blue. Mike stirred, his limbs stiff and aching, but his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He looked down at Buddy, who was still nestled against him, eyes half closed but alert. "You saved me," Mike murmured, his voice cracking. Deep down, that he might not have survived the night without Buddy's companionship. He straightened, brushing the snow off his coat. "All right, Buddy," he said, his voice steadier now. "Let's get out of here." Buddy wagged his tail, standing up and shaking the snow from his fur. The sight brought a small smile to Mike's face, a rare and unfamiliar sensation. He slung his battered guitar over his shoulder, the familiar weight reminding him of the musician he used to be, the man he had almost forgotten. They stepped out of the alley together, into the crisp morning air. The world was still cold, still harsh, but somehow it felt less daunting with Buddy trotting beside him. Mike glanced at his new companion, who looked up at him with eyes full of trust and determination. For the first time in years, Mike felt something stir within him, a spark of purpose, of resilience. He didn't know where they were going or how they would get there, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't facing this journey alone anymore. As they walked, the snow crunching beneath their feet, Mike began to hum a soft tune. It was a melody he hadn't played in years, simple but comforting. Buddy perked up at the sound, his ears twitching as if encouraging Mike to keep going. Together, they disappeared down the snow-covered street, leaving behind the alley and the despair that had once consumed Mike. The blizzard had brought them together, and now in its aftermath, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead side by side. The first rays of morning sunlight reflected off the snow-covered streets, giving the city a serene, almost magical glow. Mike trudged forward, his boots crunching against the frost, with Buddy trotting faithfully at his side. Though the cold still bit at his skin and his stomach growled with hunger, Mike felt a flicker of hopey warmth that hadn't existed before. It came from Buddy, whose presence was like a lifeline pulling him from the abyss. "All right, Buddy," Mike said, glancing down at the golden retriever who looked up at him with bright, trusting eyes. "Let's see if we can find something to eat. Maybe someone will spare a bit of kindness today." The streets were slowly waking up. A few shopkeepers began to shovel the snow from their storefronts, and early risers hurried to their destinations, their faces tucked into scarves. Mike, clutching his old guitar, found his way to a small park where the snow had been cleared enough to reveal a few scattered benches. He set down his guitar case and opened it. Its interior was frayed, the velvet lining long worn away, but it still held the same promise it always had: the chance to create something from nothing. Buddy sat obediently beside him, his tail wagging slightly, as though sensing that something important was about to happen. Mike strummed a chord, his fingers stiffened slow at first. The sound was imperfect, the cold making the strings harder to press, but it was a start. The melody that emerged was simple, familiar, a tune he had composed years ago during better times. As he played, he closed his eyes, letting the music carry him away from the cold streets and into a world where dreams were still possible. Buddy seemed to feel the magic of the music too. He sat upright, his head tilted as if listening intently, and occasionally let out a small, encouraging bark. Passers-by began to note. A few slowed their steps, curious about the man and his dog. Some lingered, smiling softly at the sight of the duo. "Good boy, Buddy," Mike whispered, giving the dog a quick scratch behind the ears. "Let's see if this works." As the morning passed, coins began to collect in the open guitar case. Not much, but enough to buy a meal. A young woman in a bright red coat stopped, crouching down to pet Buddy. "He's so sweet," she said, her voice warm. "And your music is beautiful. Do you play around here often?" "Just started today," Mike replied, his voice tinged with both gratitude and shyness. "Buddy and I were figuring things out." She smiled and dropped a few dollar bills in the case. "Good luck to both of you." By noon, Mike had enough to buy himself a sandwich and a small bag of dog food for Buddy. The golden retriever wagged his tail enthusiastically as Mike opened the bag, pouring out a portion for him on a patch of dry sidewalk. "Eat up, Buddy," Mike said, watching with a smile as the dog devoured the meal. "We earned this." As the days passed, Mike and Buddy settled into a rhythm. They moved from street corners to subway platforms, anywhere a small crowd might gather. Buddy quickly became the star of their performances, his playful antics drawing smiles and laughter from children and adults alike. Mike's music, raw and heartfelt, resonated with people. It wasn't too long before their faces became familiar in the neighborhood, and their presence was greeted with waves and kind words. One particularly cold evening, as Mike packed up his guitar, a man in a tailored coat approached them. He looked out of place on the snowy street, his polished shoes spotless despite the weather. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice crisp but not unkind. "I've seen you and your dog around the neighborhood. You're quite talented." Mike straightened, his nerves prickling. "Thanks," he replied cautiously. "I'm a producer," the man continued, offering a business card. "I help organize street performances and small local concerts. I think you and your dog could bring something special to an upcoming event I am hosting." Mike stared at the card, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're serious?" "Clean," the man said with a nod. "Think about it. Call me if you're interested." With that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Mike and Buddy standing in stunned silence. Mike turned the card over in his hand, his breath visible in the frigid air. "What do you think, Buddy?" he asked, crouching down to scratch the dog's chin. "Think we're ready for something bigger," Buddy responded with an enthusiastic bark, his tail wagging furiously. That night, as they settled in a quiet corner of the park to rest, Mike couldn't stop thinking about the opportunity. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. Yet as Buddy curled up beside him, offering his unwavering companionship, Mike felt a newfound determination. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, his hand resting on Buddy's back. "We've got a long way to go, but we'll get there together." As the stars twinkled overhead and the city slowly fell silent, Mike and Buddy drifted off to sleep, dreaming of brighter days ahead. For the first time in years, The future didn't seem so far away it felt like something they could reach, one note and one step at a time. The soft hum of streetlights illuminated the crisp evening air as Mike and Buddy prepared for their biggest moment yet. Passed since the encounter with the producer, and Mike had finally worked up the courage to call him. To his surprise, the man had been genuine, inviting Mike and Buddy to perform at a local street music festival. It wasn't Carnegie Hall, but for Mike, it felt like the world was starting to notice him again. The festival was held in a bustling plaza, strung with fairy lights and filled with the mingling scents of roasted chestnuts and warm pretzels. Performers dotted the area, each with their own little crowd. But it was Mike and Buddy who seemed to steal the attention. Mike adjusted the strap of his guitar and looked down at Buddy. "You ready, boy?" he asked, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Buddy wagged his tail and let out a happy bark, as if to say, "Let's do this." As the first notes of Micah's song filled the plaza, a hush fell over the small crowd gathering in front of them. His music was raw and soulful, each chord carrying the weight of his struggles and the hope he'd found with Buddy. People stopped mid-step, drawn in by the authenticity of the performance. Children giggled as Buddy wagged his tail in rhythm, occasionally barking as if to join the melody. The connection between man and dog was unmistakable, and it touched the audience in a way few performances could. By the time Mike finished his third song, the crowd had doubled in size. Applause echoed through the plaza, louder and more genuine than anything Mike had ever experienced. "That was incredible," said a young man as he dropped a folded bill into Mike's open guitar case. "You've got something special." "Thanks," Mike replied, smiling, his voice filled with gratitude. He bent down to scratch Buddy behind the ears. "It's all because of him." As the night went on, more people approached. Some offered kind word, others left donations, and a few asked for photos with Buddy. The golden retriever, ever the charmer, soaked up the attention with a wagging tail and gentle demeanor. Near the end of the festival, the producer who had invited them approached with a wide grin. "Mike, that was phenomenal. The crowd loved you too." "Thank you," Mike said, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline of performing. "I can't believe this is real." "It's just the beginning," the producer replied. "I've got another idea, something bigger. There's a showcase happening next month with some prominent artists. I think you and Buddy would be perfect for it." Mike's heart skipped a beat. He looked down at Buddy, who tilted his head as if sensing the excitement. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," the producer said with a laugh. "I'll handle the detail. You just keep doing what you're redoing." As the night drew to a close and the festival lights dimmed, Mike and Buddy walked home being a quiet corner of the park that they had made their own. The night was still cold, but Mike barely noticed it. His mind buzzed with possibilities, with dreams that no longer felt so far away. Sitting down on their makeshift bed, Mike pulled Buddy close. "Can you believe it, Buddy? We're actually getting somewhere." Buddy wagged his tail and licked Mike's hand, his eyes full of trust. "I don't know where this is going," Mike continued, his voice soft but full of determination. "But as long as we read together, I know it'll be okay." Under the vast expanse of star, Mike held Buddy close and strummed his guitar softly, a tune of hope and promise filling the night air. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like they were on the right path. Together, they would see it through no matter where it led. The showcase was set in a small yet elegant theater, its stage lit by warm spotlights and framed by rich velvet curtains. The audience buzzed with excitement as artists from all walks of life prepared to perform. Mike and Buddy waited backstage, surrounded by professionals whose polished appearances and confidence contrasted sharply with his own worn clothes and humble demeanor. Mike ran a hand through his hair, nerves threatening to consume him. "This is it, Buddy," he whispered, crouching beside the golden retriever. "Biggest stage we've ever been on. Think we can pull it off?" Buddy, as always, wagged his tail and gave Mike a reassuring nudge with his nose. It was the same quiet encouragement that had carried Mike through every hardship since that snowy night when Buddy first found him. The announcer called their names, and Mike's heart pounded as he stepped onto the stage, Buddy trotting faithfully by his side. The lights were blinding at first, and for a moment Mike froze, overwhelmed by the sea of faces staring back at him. But then he felt Buddy swarm for brush against his leg, grounding him. He took a deep breath, positioned his guitar, and began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but they soon gave way to a melody filled with raw emotion. It was a song Mike had written just days ago, piece inspired by his journey, by the trials he had endured, and by the bond that had saved him. The audience fell silent, captivated by the honesty in his voice and the story told through his music. Buddy added his charm, wagging his tail in time with the beat and sitting proudly at Mike's feet. At one point, he let out a perfectly timed bark that sent ripples of laughter through the crowd, lightening the mood without breaking the spell. By the time Mike strummed the final chord, the theater erupted into applause. It wasn't polite or obligatory, it was genuine, thunderous, and filled with admiration. Mike stood there stunned, as people rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Buddy barked happily, his tail wagging so hard it thumped against the stage floor. Backstage, the producer greeted them with an ecstatic grin. "You nailed it, Mike." "Absolutely nailed." "People are already asking when they can see you again." Mike felt a lump form in his throat. I can't believe this. "I never thought we'd come this far." "You've got a gift," the producer said firmly. "And that dog, he's your secret weapon. The two of you are unstoppable." As the night wound down, Mike and Buddy walked out of the crisp night air, their breath visible in the cold. The stars above seemed brighter than they had in years, and the city, for all its chaos and challenges, felt alive with possibilities. They didn't have a grand apartment or a luxurious lifestyle waiting for them, but they had each other. And now they had a future filled with music, connection, and purpose. Sitting on a bench in their favorite park, Mike looked down at Buddy, who gazed back at him with the same unwavering trust he had shown since the beginning. "We did it, Buddy," Mike said softly, stroking the dog's golden fur. "And this is just the start. Wherever the road takes us, we'll keep going." Buddy barked, his tail wagging in agreement, and as Mike picked up his guitar to play a soft tune under the stars, the world felt a little warmer, a little brighter, and a whole lot more hopeful.